Recombination Nation explores how cultural and biological experimentation can lead us to a post-industrial future, one that is more interesting and plausible than either Star Trek or Mad Max. If you want to support my work, sign up to my Substack, where you can read free weekly updates from my experimental farm, book reviews, and deep dives. A paid subscription gives you access to the audiobook of Taming the Apocalypse, a bold survey of the hidden domestication potential across the entire tree of life, plus my archive of over 150 past posts. Welcome to the Recombination Nation podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Simon Michaux. He has a background in research mining engineering, and he has always stood out and been on my radar for quite a number of years as a system thinker working in the resource sector. And he has hands-on experience across the entire industrial value chain, from raw ores all the way through to recycling. And based on his analysis of the challenges that our industrial system is facing, and in particular the promised renewable energy revolution that is widely spruiked, but maybe not as rosy as we've all been led to believe, he's developed an alternative approach to developing a circular economy, and to get around the emerging challenges of scarcity of minerals and the depleting abundance of fossil fuels that's kind of putting a pincer movement on our civilization as we know it. So before we kick into the questions that I've lined up, Simon, do you want to tell us a bit more about who you are and how you ended up in this particular position in life?
G'day, Shane. It's nice to meet an Aussie again. Right. So my training was a Bachelor of Applied Science, Physics and Geology. Um, did a bit of mining geology, open pit optimization, all that sort of stuff. Did a PhD in mining engineering and explosives. So then I was working for the research in the University of Queensland, JKMRC, for a period of time. I was in a field called geometallurgy, which is a systems thinking approach between geology and mineral processing. And then I was in comminution, rock breakage, and a bit of blasting, a bit of flotation, a bit of leaching. The mining industry crashed in 2012, and people like me are all on the street looking for a taxi to drive. So for a year, the only work I could get was working as a laborer on an organic farm, which is where I learned and to understand regen agriculture, and furniture removal. So I was carrying pianos in the rain. So as a laborer on the farm, so in that era, all my qualifications, my professional contacts, none of it meant anything, and it was very good at clearing the head. Because as all the stuff that goes into maintaining a career was wiped out, and it was so much, and it really, really did, and it was scary. It was really scary, but it cleared the head. And PhD stood for post-hole digger. And yeah, I know that dad joke. So the information I was collecting at the time was the mining industry was grading into a new era where things are getting more and more difficult for them to make money. There was a number of technical issues that I'd come across that were driving problems. But corporate leadership weren't interested in hearing any of that because it would require them to actually sort of change, which means they were going to be difficult to work for. And so I walked away. And so walk away from Australia and walk away from the mining industry. So I went to Europe, Belgium, University of Liège, to learn industrial recycling. Things like sorting and hydrometallurgy and pyrometallurgy and all that. So when I was there, I came across the circular economy and they were talking about, the green transition and here's where things got interesting. Leaving Australia, in 2012, 2013, the People's Republic of China, the government in China, turned the tap off. They didn't want our resources anymore, and everything crashed. The entire Southern Hemisphere mining industry went from the richest boom we've ever seen to nothing almost overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, really tough for everyone involved. So for a couple of years, people who were doing very good work were going to the wall because there just wasn't the money. and this is where I says like the consequences of not pointing out a problem when you don't see it coming. So and then you pull a Phoenix move, you come out the other side, and I'm sitting in these meetings in Brussels, in the European Commission, listening to them hand down the tablets of what's going to happen for the future. I used to hear the most flamboyant bullshit. It's they were making promises that were unsupportable. That it was just unsupportable. You couldn't you couldn't do any of this. But what I was expecting when I came to Europe was because they've been talking about renewable technology for 25 years now, and they got serious in 2018. They started, so right, we're going to do it. So by 2015, you'd think when I get there, like, I worked in the private sector for a short period of time, supporting feasibility studies just before the crash. Right. So when I got to Europe, I was expecting the equivalent of what we call a scoping study. We knew, for example, fossil fuels were going. We knew the technology that wind turbines, solar panels, students and hamster wheels. We knew what we were going to do to replace these systems. We've been talking about it at that stage for about 7 or 8 years. So what I was expecting, and the amount of money being thrown around here would appall you. It was the highest profile meetings I've seen. I was expecting the equivalent of a scoping study for, okay, this region has this amount of power demand. We're going to have this power plants of wind, solar, geothermal, blah, 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 blah. We're going to have this many units. It's going to have this infrastructure that supports it roughly, back of the envelope, roughly scoping study stuff. Like all my work is essentially a primitive scoping study. But that sort of thing we've done, like the number of power of say solar power arrays, number of wind turbines, where they're going to be, a rough idea of who has to administer them politically. Um, it's not that complicated.
Hmm.
None of it was done.
Yeah.
None.
I'm guessing
None.
I'm guessing in the mining industry, if you're starting a new mine and you have to get everything you need on site, either it works and the company makes money and survives, or it fails and the company like goes out of business.
Right.
With
So
politics, it's not quite the same. You can make promises and 20 years later not deliver, and there's still a political party most of the time.
so the mining industry has many faults, but there's all has many things that help us here. And one of them is they have this brutal, hard-nosed view of reality of what works and what doesn't, what's needed and what's not needed.
Hmm.
Right. And so certain things you walk into a situation looking at it says, well, this is obvious. It's obvious we need this, this, and okay, politicians serve a purpose.
Hmm.
Uh, so, but what it seems to be happening is two things. Society at large has a series of beliefs, ideological beliefs. Meanwhile, they do something else. They do other things.
Hmm.
Uh, for
It's
example, they
interesting
believe
that, there's an old saying that politics is the art of the possible, but I
Mhm.
guess today all that's possible is spin.
So, but that spin, I think, is not an accident either.
Mm,
I think at some level, that spin is understood.
hmm
We know what is happening.
hmm
So, what was I saying? It's
Well, do you want to tell us like a kind of snapshot, like your greatest hits of the
okay,
constraints that would make a transition to a wind and solar based industrial
sure,
economy pretty much impossible.
okay.
I've seen a lot of your stuff on this, and it's like regularly I have my hair blown back by the stuff that you point out.
So this is a bit of a roller coaster.
Mm,
So back in 2007, I was looking at the energy of grinding ore.
mm,
I came to the conclusion that the mining industry was intimately dependent on fossil fuels, oil and gas in particular. Oil to run the petroleum to run the truck and shovel fleet, and gas to run the power plants. Okay, so I've since collected a lot of information to show that, we've got this thing called peak oil, which at some point we don't run out of oil, but the ability to supply the oil to the market to the rate we want will decline. And in 2009, I developed what I call peak mining. And the most hostile audience I've ever presented to was the first presentation to an audience of corporate mining professionals about peak mining. And we had a King of the Mountain defense where, it says, is this data real? But, to their credit, uh, they had a proper debate.
Mm,
And to their credit, they said, all right, because you've used our data, we've got no choice but to not disagree.
mm.
Um, but please don't say this to any sponsors.
Mm,
Because at the time that the corporate world, the business world is run on perception. And this is where, the difference between a confidence trickster and a successful businessman is whether someone believes them or not.
mhm,
Is the flow of money. And that not always the case, but it's the case enough of the time that if you said an uncomfortable truth out loud, you have the capacity to seriously damage things.
mm,
And then there's so all right, so 2009 peak mining. And the idea was when energy peaked and declined, rates of mining would peak and decline. And at the same time, grade was decreasing because we'd mined out all the good deposits and we had the poor ones left. The grind size is how fine we have to grind the ore, that was going down. But there's an exponential relationship with how fine you grind the ore and energy consumption, called
mhm,
the Hooke
mhm.
relationship.
Yeah.
So the finer you go, the more energy you need. Water consumption was going up. So cost of mining was going up, energy consumption was going up, but energy reserves and ability that was going down.
Mhm,
At the same time, our financial systems in the background were being saturated with debt because, their fiat currencies and they've been managed inappropriately, and they were, printing money to keep going. But we got to the saturation point where they got the level of almost paralysis. Like back in 1913, when a dollar was worth a dollar, but then the Federal Reserve went in the United States formed the fractional banking system, and then 1972 the decoupling of the gold standard, and anyway, so there's all these things that happened. But now that it's got to the point where the purchasing power of the dollar is down to 1 or 2 cents.
mhm, mhm,
So while these problems are happening at a technical level, our economic systems are reaching saturation points. So there's this thing that the market will fix it is actually not correct. What's now happening is the market will the economic market is not in a fit for purpose form to oversee industrial reform. And that was the message back in 2009.
mm.
Very controversial at the time. It may have been what's called a career limiting move. Okay, fast forward. Then because certain things were very apparent, something was very wrong structurally, but our leadership was not interested. The people around us just weren't interested. So we might even call it a mass formation now. We just weren't interested in looking at this because a series of beliefs were challenged, and those beliefs were resources were infinite, money was reality, money was actually the language that defined reality. Um, the thing like growing a food, not important.
Mm,
Just buy it at the supermarket.
mhm,
There's a whole series, growth, growth, growth. When I was working for a private company in Australia, I won't to say who, but their primary objectives were growth and making money
mhm,
in that order. They were the
mhm,
primary, and both of those objectives were fundamentally inappropriate in a finite system. So I became very interested in the limits to growth, and I now talk to the Club of Rome every now and then, and it's possible I could be. Oh, and hang on, that's later. Sorry. Then I joined the Transition Town movement, run on Mount Tamborine. Um,
Which
A
isn't
guy
too
called
far
Shane
from me
Heaton.
in Australia. Yeah,
Yeah,
coincidentally.
Shane Heaton was the guy that was running it, and he was actually quite a visionary. Anyway, we wrote an EDAP, an Energy Descent Action Plan. What I My vision was to take the entirety of Mount Tamborine and all the little groups around it, self-sufficient as one unit. So instead, and so to me, the self-sufficient, uh, the best scale to do things was a small town,
Hmm.
not a city. Stay away from cities. A small town, and then you have relationships with other towns, and then you trade. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, so there was an era of developing that. Then I came to Europe. I'm sitting in Europe. I also started studying systems and life systems, and I came to the conclusion that the environmental movement was flagellating themselves over one particular issue, and they were ignoring everything else. The ecological crisis. To me, okay, carbon's a thing, but the real problem is the species die-off.
Hmm.
The daily species, the ocean acidification, land degradation. Hello, systems. But none of that was actually part of the thinking at the time. And while they would acknowledge it happens, they'd look at me like a poleaxed hobbit when I suggested that I tried to, you know, we've got to, if we were to get out there and plant a lot of trees and rehabilitate land that's been, sterilized by industrial agriculture, we could make a real difference with not that much money.
Mm.
Crickets. Anyway, so I came to Europe, and so I was working on a series of things in industrial recycling, learning it. I did have an insight that mining and recycling are actually part of the same discipline because they use the same technology and they've got the same goals, metal extraction.
Mm.
Uh, there are some differences at the beginning, though, and so in terms of the stockpile of recycled stuff, you've got no idea what's coming up the belt. So the idea of sorting and hyperspectral analysis to actually work out what is on the belt in time to make an engineering decision, yeah, all that.
Mm.
In 2017, I wrote what I call the Acme report. This was actually the first of the big reports where I'm making the case that the real economy and the fiat economy separated.
Hmm.
They separated in 1972 when we decoupled from the gold standard. So the real economy is physical things.
I like to
Uh,
put that moment we chose fake wealth rather than real poverty.
yeah. Yeah. Well, at the time, the United States was insolvent,
Mm.
and if it was to play by the rules, it would have accepted that, they'd done things inappropriately and they would have a crash, and it would mean they would have to step back from being the world's superpower.
Mm.
So, oh, no, 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 let's just make money instead. Followed by the the Saudi oil US dollar agreement.
Mm.
All
The
oil is
petrodollar
purchased in US
cycle.
dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that forced the entire world, to engage in a fiat currency and that became the power source for the US empire.
Hmm.
So anyway, so the real economy and the fake economy diverged, and that was the warning shot. These problems have been building for about 50, 60 years,
Mm.
which means they're not going to be fixed easily, right? It's appropriate. For example, if you were to fix it politely, it would take many, many decades. Less politely, you could burn it down in a couple of years and build something new.
Hmm.
Which is we've chosen the latter.
Mm.
And in fact, our policymakers have chosen the latter. But their plan involves our pain.
Hmm.
So more on that later.
Mm.
So all right. So I made that case. I then the funding ran out in Belgium, and I was about to return to Australia with my tail between my legs and say, all right, yeah, okay, this didn't work. And at the 11th hour, a job came up in Finland with mineral intelligence. And mineral intelligence is uh, the mandate was to track patterns in data. What I was actually doing under the table now became the job.
Hmm.
Uh, I was to focus on mining, but anything attached to mining and in systems thinking, that's actually the entire value chain.
Mm.
And so, and I actually started to actually put together, and then I was promoted to associate professor. I joined the circular economy. Circular economy is the idea that instead of actually, the linear economy is we dig stuff up out of the ground, like coal and metals. We turn it into stuff, use it, throw it away, and then we bury the stuff in landfill, and it all goes in one direction.
Mm.
You start with one hole and you fill another hole. And in between, you have a lot of destruction.
Hmm.
That's fine in a short term, but it's not very sustainable long term. The circular economy is to take that waste, recycle it, and insert it into the manufacture stream. And the idea was there'd be no mining and no waste dumping. Now, unfortunately, that's not thermodynamically balanced,
Hmm.
and that's not going anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. At the very least, you need energy to make that cycle turn,
Right.
and getting like the last fraction of a percent of those atoms to not get bled out of the system takes exponentially more energy. So there's always going to be some losses in the cycle.
Right. Here's this actually now we're touching on the belief behind our current business model.
Mm.
In the circular economy, we have what's called the critical raw materials map. And one, you've got economic importance. The other axis, you've got supply, scarcity of supply. But in that scarcity of supply, at no time are they talking about mineral resources,
Hmm.
right? So, we'll just magic up more.
We'll just
If
dig a
if the
bit
price
deeper.
goes up, yeah, if the price goes up, we can just go out and find more. This is what, the neoclassical economics was the fundamental belief system behind our industrial society. If you get the time, check out Steve Keen. He's another
Hmm.
Aussie.
Yeah,
He's
yeah, I know
tearing up the
his
dance
work.
floor.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and he's a good bloke. Um, right. So, yeah, and so when I got to what really surprised me when I was at the interview, I had two job offers. One was Finland, and what they were offering was the lowest wage I'd had in 20 years. And there was a job offer in Australia which had a reasonable wage. We were back up at 150, 160. But the contract was only for 6 months, maybe, and then we look at an extension after that.
Mm.
And but what the Finnish offered was a permanent contract. Right. But what sealed the deal was I could casually throw across the table some of these questions that we're talking about.
Mm.
And instead of running screaming from the building, the people on the other side go, well, we know some of this stuff. We don't know others. But then they says, but we can discuss it.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
I go, wow.
I think Finland is one of the relatively sane political economies in the world, particularly with how they've managed their own resource base.
They were.
Mm.
Some of the decisions made in the last couple of years, they've been told what to do by the World Economic Forum, and they've done it,
Ah.
which I think is strategically disastrous.
Hmm. Mm.
But there is a strength here that I do not see anywhere else. They will look at reality. Like they're a prepper nation. Like the nation of Finland has a stockpile of all the necessities, food and medicine and fuel for 8 months for everyone
Hmm.
in Finland
Hmm.
in case they've got to go to war, probably
Me
with the Russians.
Meanwhile,
Uh,
Australia finally bought a strategic petroleum reserve in California.
yeah, yeah. Uh, you know, um, yeah, it's what I actually came to Australian Parliament and presented my stuff to them. I think it was 2 years ago,
Mm.
and they meant well. They really did mean well, but they were so trapped in their thinking.
Yeah. Mm.
They were so trapped, and I go, well, run about, wave your arms, scream and shout.
Hmm.
Next. Uh, so
Mm.
yeah. Anyway,
Mm.
so I started to. What really impressed me was we could actually talk reality. So the stuff I'd seen in Belgium the previous couple of years, where I saw like amazing disconnect. Vast amount of money was talking about things that just never going to happen,
Mm.
and it was delusional. But this was actually policy. to the point where they wouldn't actually allow other things to happen. And this was actually sort of happening all over the place. So how do I communicate that? And so for years I've been talking like, how do I communicate what I'm seeing in a form that it can't be ignored? Because what's happened is so many people before me had actually stepped into this arena and they'd raised the flag, but they'd actually been dismissed with a flea in their ear because it was in a form that the people they were talking to could dismiss it. And that's the problem.
Mm,
This is a it's we're challenging their worldview.
hmm
We're challenging their worldview.
it's almost like you'd seen
Um,
three waves of troops be ordered to like walk into the machine gun fire before you, and you're like, I'm gonna have to play this a bit differently
yeah.
when your
So,
turn came.
but and then the order comes down. Okay, walk slowly towards that machine gun mess.
Mm.
And you're like, no, no. Uh, so so yeah, and so what was missing was numbers.
hmm
There was a lack of numbers. There was a lack of actual concrete, and they would say things. Oh, that study doesn't exist. No one's done the work. Therefore, was it causation? Correlation is not causation,
mm
which is such a cop out. I'd fire them all. Yeah, right, and so what I did to in Finland, told the guys, I said, look, we need to on the back of napkin. I'm sitting down with management in over lunch, and on the back of a napkin, I sketch out every car in the current fleet, and I estimated 1 billion. Later, I actually found 1.4, and the real number is probably 1.6
mm
in 2018. So for 1 billion cars, if they were all electric vehicles and they're all a BMW i3, which so we have a rough estimate of the metal content. How much cobalt? When I arrived in 2018, everything was battery, 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 and the
mm
mineral to chase was cobalt. Now
hmm
it's lithium.
hmm
Um, Battery, 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 and I go, all right, so here's cobalt. And so we need this amount of cobalt, but all the reserves and resources for cobalt are this.
Yeah, tiny
And
by
I said,
comparison.
right, and then I pointed out that's just the cars. That doesn't involve, trucks, trains, ships, airplanes. It's all missing.
Mm.
And so what I pointed out to them is just like the management, the leadership of corporate Europe, the captains of industry would turn to the geological surveys of Europe, GTK in particular, because they oversee a batteries portfolio. Why didn't you tell us?
hmm
Right. So at that point, and it says, we need to get, I think, yeah, we need to get in front of this, go and do the work. And so while it was going to be unpopular, it was to cover their ass later.
Mm.
At least we've actually raised the flag. So I developed the idea of now everyone who's gone before me who's tried this sort of stuff has had um, their careers burned. Everything I did in the last 7 years has been a risk, and each report could have been the last. I
hmm
was okay with that because my understanding of what was happening is we were collectively going in the wrong direction, and all work thus far was relatively pointless.
hmm
So the idea was to actually sort of get a series of works out that were um, uh, constitution class. Okay, so as a personal thing, what I do to organize my thoughts, I uh, have I use the ships like a maritime ship as an example,
mm
and the USS Constitution was never defeated. It scared the hell out of everyone in its day. It's still afloat. And so once you do a piece of work, it remains relevant. It is not undone. It can
hmm
be eclipsed by other pieces of work, but this is still a valuable piece of work. This was what I was trying to do, and so I've got a whole lot of ships that are like a message. Anyway, so the idea was to actually publish 6 reports, but in reverse order.
hmm
And so the first one that came out, so I was in a project that was actually collecting information for mineral intelligence about who mined what and who did what. So I put my hand up and say, we don't talk about oil, gas, and coal or uranium.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Mm.
And the room went quiet. And I said, no, we're not allowed to talk about that. Others are doing that. And I said, but this is really important. They said, stop.
Yeah.
And I said, and if you actually say any of this again, we're going to strike your comments out of the minutes. Shut your mouth. Yeah. Whoa. So that pissed me off. Now, as you may know, anger gets shit done. So I went away, and the first report to write in the sequence was oil from a critical raw materials perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote a 500-page nasty report full of data, which was a tour of duty through the entire oil industry. Now, to get that reviewed, the British Geological Survey and the Norwegian Geological Survey, both of which oversee oil um, prospects, would not review it. And
Mm-hmm.
they recommended, get this, I get a BP to review it.
Oh.
So, well, I got a couple of retired oil professionals to be the review panel for that one. But what that was the oil industry wanted to keep things in-house.
Mm-hmm.
They'll feed us the information. So when you look at BP stats, for example, from year to year, they use different units, and it's really hard to compare apples with apples.
Mm-hmm.
And you bastards. Anyway, so I believe they understand their net position very well, and they've been trying to sort of keep it sort of quiet while appearing to disclose information.
The situation reminds me, here's an analogy. Imagine you're running a restaurant and back in the kitchen, you're like, oh, we're running out of these critical ingredients. And they look at all the people lined up around the street to get in. And they could tell
Hmm.
them the honest truth immediately, but most of them would either riot or go elsewhere
Yep.
before the
Mm.
last
Yep.
dregs actually got, served up to the last lucky
Mm.
people. So it's in their best interest to just wait for that moment when the disaster
Yep.
is
And the
undeniable.
the plan for the restaurant owners is to get the customers to eat each other. That's great. Tops.
Mm, mm.
So
Oh, and I should point out too, you mentioned cobalt, and a lot of people will say, oh, but they're developing new batteries that don't need cobalt. It's not just cobalt. This is
hmm,
widely distributed across all minerals. Some are much worse than
yeah,
others.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah. So cobalt was the metal of the day to chase. Now they've got all these battery chemistries that like the International Energy Agency put out a report that looked at the battery chemistries that'll be dominating the market in 2050. So I got hold of those, and LFP was one, and most of them require lithium.
hmm
Cobalt is in a lot of them, but not all of them. But the minerals of interest are copper, uh, cobalt, nickel, graphite, vanadium.
hmm
And they're the ones that we have shortfalls on when you actually put the whole system together.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and a few
All
of
right.
those are like cross-subsidized byproducts of producing other metals, so they're really difficult to
Can be.
scale on their own.
Yep. Yep. Like if you're after indium, for example, we just need it for hydrogen fuel cells.
Hmm
Um, you don't mine indium, you mine zinc,
hmm
and the indium's a trace element in the zinc concentrate. So and so yeah. Anyway, so there was six reports. Oil was one. And when I first brought that out, the guys I was working with, oh, interesting report. We've no idea why you've done it though. Because they've got no horse. Finland has no oil. I said, well, why'd you do it?
Mm.
And then I showed them the graph of total liquids consumption versus GDP, which is like a really strong. We're a petroleum-driven society.
hmm
So if for whatever reason oil becomes unavailable or even volatile, then our economics becomes unavailable and volatile. And they go,
hmm
oh. Uh, so all right. So the next report. So this was to be a conversation because when I actually get the real work out there, the shout will be, "You're in the pay of the oil industry." Oh, Christ. Which is which is why I wrote the oil report first. That's
hmm
already out. So then the next piece of work was just to say uh, we the green transition won't work.
Mm.
So I actually wrote a big report that actually had how much, how big was the system? Like I mapped the world in 2018. They didn't even know how many cars there were in the
Mm.
fleet. If they didn't know that, how do they know how many batteries they need, let alone charging capacity? It was just like magical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to do a lot of really basic stuff. And the review panel kept saying, "Oh, you can't say that without including this, or that, or this," and suddenly it's a 1,000-page report.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start whinging about 1,000-page reports. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, in my work, the reports are on the heavy side, but you can't please everyone.
Mm.
What you can do is decide who to piss off. Now, if I can have everything in there so everything is self-supported and looked after and cross-referenced, but then this lasts too long, this is not my problem. You don't have an attention span, mate. At
Mm.
least my ass is covered.
Mm-hmm. I guess
So
they can
yeah, all
feed it
right.
into ChatGPT these days
And
if
they
they're in a
do.
hurry.
They
Yeah.
do.
Mm.
There was a Facebook group based in Sweden, 25,000 strong, who formed to debunk my work.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was using, main data sources, it turned into a discussion platform
Mm-hmm.
instead. Right. So the hot button issue in that work was wind and solar
Mm-hmm.
need a buffer.
Mm-hmm.
You they're both highly volatile. Conventional thinking believes they only need 5 to 7 hours buffer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the calculation for that is the difference between supply and demand. Every now and then there's a couple of hours gap, and you just need to keep for a couple of days. They did not look at how do we get through a single night. The sun goes
Mm-hmm.
down, no more solar.
Mm-hmm.
They did not look at the difference between winter and summer. Like in winter, the sun is not as strong as it is in winter.
Mm-hmm.
Solar radiance.
Particularly
They
in
did
Europe.
not look. Duh. Yeah, they're saying this stuff, and out the window there's like half a meter of snow that covers everything, including solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, guys, really? Uh, so then wind also is actually amazingly volatile. Like it goes all over the place on a short term, but also on a long term basis,
Mm.
and that's the real problem. Um, yeah, so this came back with the size of the size of the system. The next piece of work was how much metal would we need to make one replacement for everything. All
Yep.
fossil fuel systems are phased out and the new systems come in.
Yep.
We now know how many wind turbines, solar panels, and cars. Okay, what's in them, those units, and how much metal do we need? The which was enormous,
I
and
think
it's
you've
also
said it for many elements, it's more than the entire history of that
yep,
element that we've mined, and we need to do it in
that's
like
correct.
the next 10 years.
That's next 20,
Mm.
next 25. So, but then the third part of the work was, well, where we get this metal from, and then I compared it up against mineral reserves, mineral resources, and what mineral resources we know of under the sea. And the answer is one just to make the first generation of stuff, right? Let's say copper. We need 6.1 billion tons of copper to do that.
Mm.
And we think we need this by 2050. Right. So 6.1 billion. Now, our annual production of copper is 24 million worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we need that for other things,
Mm-hmm.
but if we were to task all of that copper production to hit that target, it would take 250 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Without
So, which means,
depleting resources, assuming you can just keep chugging along and not hit the
so,
bottom
so,
of the
but then
barrel.
you say, oh, we just need to find more resources. Well, our resources and reserves are only about 18% of that. And so the shortfall is so large, it's not a matter of just going finding more. It also takes like 20 years to start a mine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like it takes time, and
And
that
then
time
all
we
of
don't
that
have.
renewable equipment, I think you say, has maybe at best a 20-year life cycle. So after another 20 years, you have to do it all over
You have to
again.
do it all again. Yeah.
Yeah.
So wind turbines have an economic life cycle of about 12 years, and after
Mm-hmm.
that, they're not as effective, and they prefer to actually replace them.
Mm-hmm.
That's from an insurance point of view. I assume 20, but even if I say 50, these
Mm.
are geological resources.
Yeah.
Um, hello. Right. So then
Mm.
there was, oh, we need to mine more. So then I wrote a mining to the limits of growth. Um, which basically see the Limits of Growth Report 1972, Club of Rome, uh, was essentially correct. When you look at historical data, it's we're going to go through this sequence, so there are limits.
Mm.
Then I brought in all the work that I was bringing in from Australia from the previous 10 years, grades decreasing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so there is a problem here. Then I says, all right, smart guy, you frightened us now. Now what do we do? So then I said, well, fix it. Like someone from the Swedish government challenged me and says, you're going to fix this now.
Yeah, they want
And
a
so they
happy
gave
ending to
me.
the movie.
So if when you go and take the stage and you present this stuff, I've actually had someone stand up in the audience, like in an academic audience. You're presenting a very negative view of the world. Are you sure you want to do that?
Mm.
And the need for hopes and rainbows is very real. Every group I talked to and presented to, they said, well, we're under a lot of pressure not to say anything negative.
Mm.
And I go, "Ah." Right. So they won't face reality until there's a solution. So they always say, if you were to refit the circular economy and restructure stuff, and we made it a policy brief, how would you do it?
Mm.
And so this is the idea that when you actually sort of come to a new restructure stuff, there's a sequence of events, like a hierarchy, like the Maslow hierarchy of needs, but now for a city. So, and then how would you restructure it, and what would it look like? And so then I wrote a report called Evolution of the Circular Economy into the Resource Balanced Economy. Now, the resource balanced economy is an evolution of the resource-based economy, which was developed by Jacques Fresco of the Venus Project. And so he had the idea that we were to build a city, but optimize it using the best technology and science we had to offer, but we were to optimize it to the quality of life of the people living in the city. What would it be?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's actually something I'm now using. Um, but I've now added energy terms and thermal statistics and entropy
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
terms, because you've got to have biophysical balance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where everything tends to fall over. Yeah, and so then the last piece of work was there were six in a series, and the last one was a policy assessment report for Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
If Hawaii was to phase stuff out, what would it look like? And in that, we went through all the 10 scenarios. All the conventional stuff won't work. But I also looked at if we were to map the circular economy in full in its current form, what would it be? And so it turns out that you don't need that much infrastructure. They only need something like 38 recycling plants, which compared to the infrastructure needed for the green transition was a fraction.
Mm-hmm.
It was very small. But the material coming out of that was a fraction of the material that they needed to consume. And there was no manufacturing in Hawaii, so the stuff had to be sent off to Southeast Asia to be used somewhere, hopefully.
Mm.
And then you've got, well, is this economically worthwhile? The answer is no.
Mm.
So you have to change the rules. Then I actually looked at if Hawaii was to source all of its food from regenerative agriculture, permaculture, no fossil fuels, organic farms, what would that look like?
Mm.
And so I worked that out, and it is doable. And so I sort of had a scenario map, but the final one was what I call the purple transition. And the purple transition was all right, green transition won't work, but we still need to do certain things. And so I assembled a series of I think it's five technologies that are unorthodox, but they're fairly mature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and right, and so society can be mapped around that. So the first one was all conventional energy systems have a problem, including conventional nuclear. Conventional nuclear cannot expand fast enough to be useful with the time it takes to build a plant.
Mm-hmm.
Even if we actually reduce that to 5 years, yeah, good luck with that.
Mm.
Uh, it would still take 75 years to expand out. If we brought 25 new systems online a year, including replacing decommissioned ones, uh, 75 years later, we've depleted our existing resources of
Mm.
uranium. Now, we can go find more, but in 75 years, we've got about 60% of the way there where we need to be. Now, if whatever energy system happens next, it's got to be operational in the next 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So conventional nuclear is not going to work. It's useful, but it has its problems.
Mm.
Now, so it's a bit an evolution of nuclear is what I'm now advocating for. Generation 4 nuclear.
Mm.
And there's a whole series of technologies. One of them, there's two technologies I like now, and the fuel source is thorium,
Yeah.
not uranium, thorium. So two technologies. One is molten salt reactors, and the other is pebble bed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so anyway, but the key here is they can be small. I
Mm.
went to a factory in Europe that's actually gearing up to make these and have them roll out in 2028. They're going to make one of these a day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you've got a shipping container sized power plant that puts out 40 megawatts of electricity,
Mm-hmm.
loaded with 50 years of fuel as it's deployed. And it's got the complexity of a three-bedroom home, kit home.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they say they're going to manufacture one a day, that's not a problem. One factory, one a day. Really? Oh, yeah. So there's that. The next technology was um, the combustion of iron powder. We need to replace coal. Coal's manufacture, and we
Mm.
need high-end heat, like a heat around the 1500 degrees Celsius level. A lot of our manufacture is reliant on that. It all happens in China. We don't see any of it.
Yeah, because nuclear energy produces lower temperature heat, which is enough to run turbines and make electricity. But
Mm.
if you want to do particularly metallurgy, you need a
Yeah.
higher temperature produced consistently and cheaply. So that's
Yeah.
a,
So
yeah.
so a conventional nuclear plant is about 2 to 300 degrees Celsius,
Mm.
depending on how it's running. A thorium system can run at 560. Another thorium system can run at 950. Actually, the pebble bed's much hotter.
Mm.
Um, so okay, but that still doesn't help us if you need to get to 1500.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why they burn coal.
Mm.
You can have an electric arc furnace in some applications, but not everything. But that puts a massive strain on the electrical power grid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then you can use hydrogen, but you've got to make the hydrogen. That's where the trouble is. And the third one was you can use biofuels. But the biofuels, the planet cannot produce enough biomass
Yeah.
to replace coal. Sorry, it can't.
That
And
that was the
anyway,
lid
so
on metal production before industrialization. We've been doing
yeah,
it for centuries, but we could never produce very much of it until coal got into
yeah.
the mix.
And so then there was the we went through all that, and we got to so what I'm advocating is iron powder, the same powder that they use in the powder coating industry. So it's about 50 to 100 micron. We know how to use it. We know how to make it. If it takes a bit to get it going because it's iron, but once going, it's producing a little under 2000 degrees Celsius.
Mm-hmm.
So we can use this as a industry comes back online. There are no emissions,
Mm-hmm.
none. There's a few trace elements that come out, but they're very, 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 very low. Here's the funny part. When you burn coal, you have a pile of ash less than you can't do anything with. When you burn iron powder, pure iron powder goes to iron oxide, also known as rust.
Mm-hmm.
It's not actually destroyed. You can strip the oxygen back out and turn it back into pure iron.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So enter the circular economy. If we take human sewage and we heat it without oxygen called pyrolysis, about 35% of the mass turns into a gas called syngas. Syngas is half hydrogen, half carbon monoxide. Both of those gases are useful in a process to strip the oxygen out of the iron powder.
Mm-hmm.
So you can recycle that industrial fuel. You don't need more new iron powder. There's money in shit.
Yeah, it's more
Uh,
like a battery.
so we've now got a link between a human waste product in a human society and recycling of an industrial fuel. That changes the calculus.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out there's not enough human sewerage to just produce endless amounts of iron powder. So then we become very frugal. And so what do we use this iron powder for?
Yeah.
Like what, and then we're back to, we've got to simplify our whole system, shrink it in size. And we've got to look at the limits of the energy systems that we're looking at. These are our limits. This is what we've got to work with. And within that, this is what we've got to do.
Mm.
On the other hand, anything that rusts could be a power source.
Mm. A related question. I did a post months ago on the history of iron production and then its phase shift through industrialization. And if a transition to a thorium based technological
Mm,
system doesn't end up happening, could we be living through the end of the Iron Age? Because
probably.
the surface high quality iron reserves that are near enough to populations and energy sources, they were gone like 100 years ago. That's why iron is being shipped from Brazil and Australia to China
Hmm.
currently, because they're the last I mean, iron is very abundant, but quality reserves that have
Mm.
the right properties to be easy to use,
Yep.
they are not as abundant.
So instead of saying the lights will turn out and it just stops, what I used to say is we will transform from one state into another.
Mm,
And so we will move from one era into another.
mm,
Um, and the last couple of hundred years, everything's been easy. There's been uh, abundant energy. There's been technology that can use that energy and abundant resources to
hmm
make that technology, which essentially does a whole lot of stuff for us. There's a couple of layers in the system that we've ignored all this time.
mm,
A source of raw material that we thought was infinite, but actually wasn't, being a finite planet and all that. So if someone doesn't pull a rabbit out of the hat, let's say the thorium stuff doesn't work, there is another generation of technology beyond thorium
hmm
for us to work on. But let's say that doesn't work either. Then we are moving into a low energy future. We won't be able to do the same things, but we're a very wasteful society at the moment that is, based on materialism, that we do stupid things like the salmon case study, like fishing salmon in Scotland, put it in a ship, send it to Vietnam. In Vietnam, put it in a tin cans,
mm,
put the tin cans back in the ship, send it back to Scotland, and
hmm
put it in the supermarket. So the guys fishing, salmon off the trawler in Edinburgh would get off the ship, and on the way home, they go to the supermarket and buy a tin of salmon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Utter
yeah.
madness. Extravagance. I mean, can you see there being a potential synergy between the demographic? I mean, they call it collapse, but it's just a shrinking population. That a
Mm.
shrinking population coupled with the industrial overproduction of our era linking into recycling could actually create quite a long tail. I know with steel production, like a large percentage of that is now recycled. It's
Yes,
heading that way
to a
already.
point.
Mm,
So at the moment, we're a very consumer-based society where we make stuff and then throw it away. Okay. So, but if we get to the point where energy all of a sudden is really scarce, the human being becomes an energy source.
hmm
But raw materials will, our priorities will shift.
mm,
And all around us, what we call a city is full of useful stuff that could be repurposed if we put our minds to it.
mm,
We're talking about a fundamentally different paradigm. This is assuming no one comes up with a new energy system. So, and there's two broad frontiers that look like they might work, but let's say it doesn't. Right. So now we're going to move into, well, we now need to repurpose and recycle stuff. Life, priorities have changed. A lot of this stuff we don't need anymore. Uh, the shrinking population thing now has a couple of frontiers that says that that's what's now going to happen, which is not something that politicians are allergic to discussing such issues.
hmm
Muppets. But I'd fire them all. But yeah. So we have a different era where we're now sort of, recycling, repurposing. But what we're repurposing to has nothing to do with how we do things now.
Hmm.
At the moment, what we want, what we need, and what we do become the same thing, is what I like to say.
Hmm.
Whereas before, or at the moment, is how much of what we do on a day-to-day basis has nothing to do with, say, the sourcing of food
Hmm.
or the sourcing of energy. It all just happens in the background.
It's the
And
it's the consumer economy that we've lived
yeah,
in from like the 20s until now, a
yeah,
century of artificial demand for the products of industry to keep the whole thing kind of functioning,
yeah, yeah.
to
So,
stop it
so at a,
seizing
at
up
a
like the Great Depression, where people like had
at
bought
a
everything they wanted and stopped buying.
ideologically, at a belief level, we have a series of beliefs that are not supported by biophysical reality,
Mm.
and we are consuming multiple resources on multiple fronts to try and stave off what's happening. Yeah. Anyway,
Mm.
so we we're getting through all that, and um,
I do have one
it's a
really
different
interesting
era, different
question.
set of priorities. Yes, go on.
Let's go with the idea that the thorium powered future, um, it manages to overcome the technical legal barriers. It
Mm.
scales at the rate that's necessary to cover cover the gap. What are the geopolitical implications of a thorium-powered world? Because like so much about
Aha.
oil in the Middle East, like and various
Yep.
other oil-rich places, it's
Yep.
kind of set the tone for the last, however many decades. What would a thorium-powered world look like as nations kind of negotiate with each other?
So to answer that question is to finish answering what's happening now.
Mm,
Now, in the West, the World Nuclear Association doesn't like thorium. What happened was in 1972, a research proposal came out and said, look, here, thorium works, molten salt stuff works.
mm,
We now want to expand it into a full system. At the time, we didn't have an energy crisis, we didn't have an environmental crisis or a resource crisis. What we had was the Cold War,
hmm
and the US military called the shots. And what they wanted, this is going to make you laugh. Are you sitting down? Have you had a laugh today? Right? Because one of the things that push against thorium is oh we're proliferating nuclear weapons. The reason thorium was scotched was the US military wanted a civilian uranium nuclear power plant fleet to camouflage the manufacture of nuclear weapons.
hmm Yeah.
So also the thorium systems are fundamentally smaller, orders of magnitude smaller for the same action. Both the amount of fuel that you need, because most of the fuel is consumed, not a fraction of it, the complexity of making that fuel, and also the waste products are much less.
Yeah, you don't have
Much,
to
much less.
pull out like 0.1% of the one isotope that's actually useful as a fuel and
Yeah.
throw the rest away.
Yeah. And so, but also the waste you only is it consumes like 96% of the fuel going in.
Mm,
So so all the fuel's useful, 96 gets percent gets used. The stuff that comes out are isotopes that are not as nasty, and you store it for 300 years, not 10,000.
hmm
And half of it can be recycled into the medical industry if you so choose.
hmm
Right. So the United States, since then, I went for a job recently for the rare earth element um, portfolio in the States. And they mentioned in passing that the Department of Defense is interested in buying up thorium. Now, really, really, because I heard through another source that the Department of Homeland Security were developing their own thorium reactor because the Chinese were doing it.
hmm
That was the motivation. China has a very different approach. They are backing all horses.
hmm
They are, and in the West, we will flagellate ourselves over which system is the best, and they will undermine each other. In a winner takes all, there can only be one,
hmm
and then we'll put money into the winner, and that winner is wind and solar. In China, they go, well, we don't really know which one works, and there's no one size that fits all. So instead of picking one, we're going to back all of them.
hmm
All of them.
mm
In a horse race-like environment, they will put hundreds of millions of US dollars of research into all systems, wind and solar, more gas and coal because they've got gas and coal.
Mm,
They are also putting a lot of money into generation for nuclear on multiple fronts.
mm,
Thorium energy is one of those fronts, one of several. They have something like, I believe they have something like 20 different thorium systems of different kinds.
mm-hmm,
They've admitted to two of them.
mm.
So
And they're also right next door to India, which has the largest thorium reserves on the planet.
yeah, so India is also pursuing thorium. But the way they're doing it, you take thorium solid fuel, and the problem is when you put the thorium in there, you've got to transmute it to uranium. And while doing that, the surface of each particle corrodes into a neutron blocker
Mm,
compound. You've then got to get the radioactive fuel out of the reactor, dip it in acid to clean the surface, and then put it back in the reactor. And that's
mm,
just use uranium.
yeah.
But the molten salt systems and the pebble systems don't have that issue,
Hmm.
like at all.
Yeah.
And so these, and when you look at the writings of the World Nuclear Association, they're using the language of gaslighting to direct you away from liquid fuel fission to solid fuel fission systems, in which case thorium doesn't work very well in a conventional sense.
Hmm.
The liquid systems do, but the pebble reactors do because they have a particular coating on each particle that is you don't have the corrosion.
Hmm.
Anyway, to answer your question,
Mm,
China is out the gates and running. They've got one system selling commercial power in the Gobi Desert since 2022.
hmm.
They've got about, I don't know, is it 15, 20 systems of various different sizes, and they're in the process of building a full-scale monster,
Mm, mm,
right? That is thorium based. They're doing it. So back to what this means. At the when the power grid was first developed in the United States, you had layer upon layer upon layer, and it was the most complex mess you ever saw.
mm,
Like like in say the city of New York, you had 10 different power supplies,
hmm.
but each power supply had their own cables, right? So the power pole outside your house had 10 cables running across it, each one with different power.
Mm,
And they had, companies sabotaging each other and doing all that stuff. And eventually they said, enough's enough, we're going to simplify.
mm.
Right. So
It's a
then they had
natural
the idea,
monopoly.
yes, and then they had the idea of a massive power plant that would project power over a vast distance, like
Hmm.
across a whole state. Like you've got the Tarong power station that projects power all over Queensland.
Mm,
Okay. So now we've got the idea of every industrial site, every town, every hospital will have in the basement its own thorium reactor
hmm.
in a shipping container. So it's essentially two shipping containers. One's the reactor, the other's the steam turbine that sits next to it,
Hmm.
and the water source and all that. So so you've now got a decentralized power grid. At the moment, when anywhere in the power grid has a problem, like not just at the power plant, but also in the distribution, it shuts down,
Yeah. Yeah. It's got very
right?
narrow bounds that
Yeah,
it can actually
right.
function within.
So if you've got a decentralized system, suddenly everyone controls their own system. They've got fuel cycles of 50 years, maintenance cycles of 5 years, and so you've now got the idea that power is no longer a control point.
Mm. For
And
people who don't know thorium too, it's worth pointing out that the way the fuel works, it isn't prone to melting down and overreacting like uranium.
yes,
It's a
right.
very
So
different dynamic.
it's a very, very okay. Let's talk about that.
Mm,
So what this is you take thorium and you mix it into a salt, a fluoride-based salt or a chloride-based salt. It's not radioactive. You
mm,
can do it at any mine site where you've actually sort of got thorium as a waste product in, say, rare earth elements, for example. There's vast amounts of it around. It's not radioactive. It's what's called fertile.
mm,
Now, you take that salt, you put it in the reactor. You put a plug of uranium or even spent nuclear fuel will do the job.
hmm.
Um, Plutonium or whatever, a plug, and you irradiate inside the reactor the salt. The salt, the thorium transmutes into an isotope of uranium called U-233. That's hot. It melts the salt. The salt becomes a liquid, and then it goes around and round and round and round. It's exchanging heat.
Mm.
Now, if it gets too hot because of this particular isotope chain, if it gets too hot, a process called Doppler broadening means it cascades over the top of itself and shuts down.
Hmm.
So if it gets too hot and everything, it will shut down. Also, if it gets too hot, the fuel will melt a freeze plug, and the fuel drains out of the reactor into dump tanks, and it can be managed somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's not one but two mechanisms to prevent what we call a meltdown. But hold the phone, it's already a liquid. It can't melt down.
Hmm.
Now, that's the molten salt system. Um, the pebble system is even safer because the molten salt system's got liquid and it's under pressure. And so
Mm.
it's going round and round and round and round. And so if you get like a crack in a pipe, you've got this radioactive hot stuff leaking on the floor.
Hmm.
And it doesn't go aerosol. And once it cools down, the reaction stops. So it's a small scale thing. You're never going to get a Fukushima or a Chernobyl. It can't
Mm.
go aerosol,
Mm.
and the temperature shuts down anyway. But the pebbles, you've got like a little pellet of thorium doped with uranium, coated with what's called a triso configuration. So each pebble is about 60 millimeters in size when it's finished, with a little kernel of half a millimeter of thorium doped uranium in the center. That goes on the top of like a big tube, and they pull a pebble out down the bottom, and they test it. Is it still producing heat? Like, is it still useful, or has it decayed out? If it's decayed out, they go and send off for reprocessing. If it's still okay, they put it back in the top.
Hmm.
Nothing to melt down.
Mm.
Nothing to melt down, and nothing that can overrun.
Mm.
So
Mm.
it's inherently safe, and that's actually also a much higher temperature, which is more useful.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so the systems are so different to conventional uranium that it's almost not nuclear.
Mm.
It almost needs its own classification.
Mm. Uh,
So
the reserves are quite. I mean, there's a few big players like Australia and Brazil and the US have pretty big reserves too, but it's not as concentrated as uranium and oil geologically. So I'm guessing that
so
there's
it's
going
all
to be
over.
less of a monopoly of one person dominating supply for everyone else.
So a couple of things. Thorium's about 3 to 4 times more abundant in the crust than uranium. There's massive reserves all over the world. No one wants thorium at the moment, and it's considered a waste product.
Mm.
So there's stockpiles of thorium associated with the nuclear industry because they got to store it. They can't do anything with it. Um, Most rare earth element deposits, like monazite, for example, have about 5% thorium in them. And it's to the point where, like, well, we don't really know what to do with this, so they bury it.
Mm.
It's all over the world. Most nations have thorium in some form. So what this means is the whole control structure of like one nation controlling everything. Like, for example, the manufacture of nuclear fuel and fuel rods is dominated and controlled by Russia.
Mm.
So while we're trying to go to war with Russia, Russia,
Mm.
they happen to control our nuclear fuel supply.
I,
So the
I-
French
yeah, that's been a
used to
problem
do
for
it.
France. Yeah.
Well, the French used to do it themselves, but they decided it was cheaper to just get the Russians to do it.
Hmm.
And they've got to rebuild that capability. And there's a lot of tough talk that they can do that, but so far they haven't been able to do that.
I wonder if that was another factor in the 70s of pivoting away from thorium, that if this technology became like widely available, the ability to exert geopolitical power, control over that
Mm.
resource would have, I mean, it would have made things difficult for the Saudis for sure if there was a big
Well,
alternative coming online.
if there's an alternative, if then yeah, that whole power dynamic collapses.
Mm.
The geopolitical domination is down to some sort of natural phenomenon, like the British Empire, for example, controlled coal and
Mm.
also controlled the flow of goods around the world on the seas.
Mm.
Right. The Saudis, thus the Americans, controlled oil because it's mostly in one place. The Russians are throwing their weight around. Why? They got oil and gas.
Mm. Mm.
Right. It's something we need, can't do without. If we go to a situation where most nation states can now take control of their own value chain, and it's just easier to do, then as a control mechanism, it stops.
Mm.
There are other control mechanisms now, like China now controls the industrial manufacturing world and the smelting world.
Mm,
because we don't want to. We ceded our abilities to them over the last 50 years.
mm, mm,
So that's a controlled structure. But energy, if you go this route, then energy becomes our own. If you control you need the equivalent of complexity of running an isotope lab in a hospital, like a
hmm
medical isotope lab. It's about that level
mm.
of oversight.
Another interesting speculative question I wanted to ask you, and I mean, speculative history is fun, but it's usually wrong. But if the US in their lead position hadn't pivoted away from thorium in the 70s, do you have any like feeling for like how the world would look today? How this crisis would be unfolding differently if we were already, what's that, 40, 50 years ahead?
50 years.
Mm,
50 years. So a couple of things. Um, the last 50 years, every geopolitical action, like a war, for example, is often dominated by oil.
hmm
Um, that whole thing would have been wiped out. And so humans are humans, they probably would have found something else to fight over.
hmm
But if we had if energy became the key to security, instead of actually having control in a centralized point anywhere in the world or any scale for that matter, if it becomes decentralized, it's no longer a control bottleneck.
mm.
Okay.
It's no longer a point of contention. Yeah.
Right. So, but from the 70s, it started really in the 50s, but the materialistic kick that we've undergone, that still would have happened.
Mm,
Uh, so while we probably wouldn't have all those wars, um, I'm of the opinion a lot of these things are manufactured to keep us occupied,
hmm
right? And what, for example, the troubles that we've got socially at the moment, especially on social media and everything, where we've been encouraged to be quite cruel to each other. While we're fighting amongst ourselves, we're not going to come together in any meaningful number
mm,
to demand actual change.
hmm
Right, so those wars, if they didn't happen because we didn't need the oil anymore, oil was still industrial. Oil was still our. Actually, let me rephrase that. Oil was still our internal combustion engine transport, whereas
mm.
a thorium system would be electricity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I suppose we still would have done the internal combustion engine stuff, but yeah, and so the problems with gas are still like 10 years away.
hmm
We've got plenty of gas, you've got the money to pay for them. And it's gas and coal is what thorium would replace.
mm,
So in that context, I suppose we would have had similar problems, but we would not be facing the problems we're facing now. It's like, how the hell do we phase out fossil fuel power generation? We just don't know what to do.
mm,
So the whole green transition would not have happened
mm.
because we already would have the solution on the ground.
Yeah. 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 No, I like
And
that
what we
answer. I
would,
like that answer. Oh, I wanted to ask you too. Do you have any other wild card underappreciated resources that could limit any form of energy transition? Like, are there other pinch points in the global
yep.
industrial system that kind of get overlooked?
So there's copper.
Mm,
Copper is the big one that's now starting to be understood. You can't actually do anything without copper. Copper and nickel, actually,
mm,
if we're going to electrify everything. Um, from a value chain point of view, um, it's not the mining of resources is the problem. It's the ability to turn it into something useful. So
hmm
the smelting and refining, most of that sits in China
mm.
or Southeast Asia, and we're trying to go to war with them,
Yeah, bad idea.
right? And we're engaged in an economic warfare with them while not taking care of business to do stuff. So that's actually the true bottleneck
Mm,
there. From a resource point of view, the ability to grow food, like it's becoming very clear that petrochemical fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides are a liability.
hmm
all the debates about glyphosate, for example,
Mm,
don't do it. So this is not a resource as such because I did a thing to look at like phosphate rock, and we've still got like decades before we need to actually sort of face that. But once the phosphate rock is gone, like say around 2100, then we truly will have a problem.
mm,
But we've got to get off the petrochemical fertilizers and grow food. But now you've got within that system there, how much arable land do we have now that's still suitable because it's been deteriorating?
mm.
How do we do that? Like the people to do that, they're not, like the average age of farmers in Australia is like 65.
Yeah, yeah.
And as a profession, it's not seen as a sensible thing to do. Why would you be a farmer? It's like,
Hmm.
well, and the future is, oh, we will have robots. Yeah, great. You know, um,
Have you looked into sand for concrete? I've seen that
that
highlighted as a very unsexy issue that's kind of creeping up on us.
that was actually I was coming to that. In the beginning of my career back in '95, I was looking at manufacturing sand from crusher dust in quarries.
Ah, mm,
Because um, because what we were faced with was there's plenty of sand on the beach when you walk along it, but for environmental reasons, the places we're allowed to actually mine sand from is getting less and less. And but we're needing more and more concrete. But did you know more cement and concrete is produced in China on a yearly basis than the rest of the world combined?
mm, mm.
So they're turning their whole country into an industrial fortress. Um, so the availability of sand is going to be a problem for construction
Mm.
in areas that are environmentally acceptable to harvest the stuff. Um, that is going we are dependent on sand being cheap for
Yeah.
construction to happen.
Yeah, it's another one of those
And
resources that we just kind of picked it up off the ground for the
yep,
last however many hundred years, and now we're reaching a point where we might need to expend energy and complex technology to like
yeah,
manufacture a replacement.
yeah. There is no clear answers to this
Mm.
beyond find some other way to do construction.
Hmm. Hmm.
But as you say, it's not sexy, and people are tied up with some other things. But you don't even see that as an issue until you look at things as a system.
Hmm. Hmm. Rubber recently came on my radar as a critical resource.
Hmm.
Airplane tires are very difficult to make from petroleum synthetic rubber. You really need the natural stuff, and it's only viable in Southeast Asia, and it's massively threatened by a pest that's wiped out the American South American rubber industry.
So this is again that's another one that's perfectly viable.
Mm,
This will make you laugh. Back in 2010, 2011, there was a mining boom in Australia where it was like a form of inflation. The Chinese government wanted resources and they didn't care what they were paying for it. And there was this oil price spike in 2007, 2008,
mhm.
and they were just throwing money at it. So they were trying to mine as much as possible. Mine, 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 mine. Let's go, 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 go. Now, on mine sites, you've got big mining trucks, and these mining trucks, the tires wear out. You got these big, big, huge tires. They're like 4 or 5 meters in diameter, and they weigh several tons, and they wear out.
Mm,
So you need to put new tires on, and there was a tire shortage,
mhm.
and it got to the point where you couldn't buy new tires. So you know what the solution was, and this is actually a signature of how unbalanced all this was and that the priorities completely out of whack. Instead of actually just buying new tires and just fitting the tires to the old truck and sending it away, they'd buy a new truck because it came with 4 tires. Yeah, yeah,
Oh dear.
and due to the numbers that stacked up, especially with the issues like net present value, which the more you produce, the faster you produced it, the less interest you'd pay on the loan to actually sort of pay back your capex. That was a worthwhile decision from an economic point of view.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Wow.
you had all these trucks that were perfectly. acceptable and able to function were just parked in a field somewhere. Why?
No
Well,
tires.
no tires, or the
Yeah,
tires wore out,
yeah, yeah.
and
What
that's the
about
only thing wrong.
what about asphalt? Like that's a really interesting, like huge bulk cross-subsidized product from the oil industry that you talk about El Dorado with the gold, the roads paved with gold. Our roads are
Yeah.
literally paved with oil, and we could
Hmm.
have like you could wave a wand and have as many electric cars as you like, but then we no longer have that byproduct of the fuel that was burnt in the cars to build the roads. So is
Yeah.
that something that has some potential issues around it?
Yes. Yes, yes, and yes. So asphalt is a very when you get like a barrel of oil and you distill it, right, you get several products. And what you do is you're distilling it in terms of specific weight. The really light stuff at the top is jet fuel and gasoline.
Hmm.
Then you got the diesel in the middle bit, and then you got your bunker fuel oil you put in your ships, and then down the bottom you've got your asphalt. And your asphalt is all the really, really heavy stuff.
Mm.
Um, so now that what's now happening is they're using natural gas. Oil peaked in 2018, and we're on a plateau and everything like that. But what's happened is natural gas liquids has overridden oil to supply gasoline,
Hmm.
but they're only able to supply the lighter stuff. Things like diesel, they can't supply
Hmm.
from the gas industry.
Mm.
And so we've got a projected diesel shortage before a gasoline shortage or a
Mm.
petrol shortage.
Mm.
Uh, so asphalt is down the bottom, and so far it hasn't been a problem.
Mm.
But if diesel's going to be a problem, asphalt's going to be a problem.
Yeah, yeah.
And what they do in the States when they ran out of money, they didn't run out of resource, they ran out of money. What they did was they jackhammered up all the asphalt and they had gravel roads because they were
Hmm.
easy to maintain.
Yeah, yeah. I remember that
Which,
after the GFC spike, there
yeah,
was reports of all those local councils just giving up on their roads,
and what that,
surfacing.
yeah, and that really ripped the hell out of all the cars.
Mm.
Maintenance issues went up, but that's not their problem.
A slightly related question. A thorium-powered future could go on for like centuries. Like the thorium reserves are quite large. That
Hmm.
makes me think about how that kind of infrastructure would respond to various black swan events that are kind of
Hmm.
predictable in those timescales, like geomagnetic storms, like a major volcanic eruption cooling the planet, or an asteroid impact. Like, how would
Hmm.
that complexity stand up against those kind of systemic shocks?
Right. So, um, this is actually something I spend quite a bit of time thinking about, probably because no one else does. Like a lot of people around me professionally are just not interested.
Mm,
So let's assume, let's see, thorium at the moment is still in the demonstration phase. We've got to work out the kinks in the engineering, and like there's a few technical things to work out. We're
mm,
not there yet. Also, we've got to educate society in what this is and
hmm.
how to use it, right? And that in its own right is going to be a problem. So let's assume all of that goes by the numbers and it works. Okay. So let's say we have like these nonlinear events, which I went through this exercise and I encourage anyone listening to do the same thing. Instead of putting your hat on what is going to happen, I got a big whiteboard in the lecture theatre where I used to work. It was like a 4 meter long whiteboard. It was great. And I had a columns, and I put up 18 scenarios. Each scenario was a theory of what could happen.
Hmm.
Peak oil, hyperinflation crash, you know, bang, bang, bang. There was 18 of them.
Mm.
And at the time, for example, Earth changes were a thing, which I now believe was a psyop.
Hmm.
Um, and so what you do is you say, well, okay, we've got peak oil runs out, and so you have the statement of it, and then below that you describe what will happen if this, what sort of things will we see? All your climate change scenarios. It means this, it means that.
Mm.
If we see like a hyperinflation collapse of our market systems, we see did this. And below that, on the third line, you put sort of what might we do about this in point form to mitigate what we're doing.
Mm.
And you stand back and you look, and across all 18 scenarios, when you get to the bottom as to what we do about it, was actually the same most of the way along the bottom,
Mm.
most of the way. And so instead of actually sort of, jumping up and down and carrying on like a pork chop about arguing with each other of which particular problem we think is going to do us in,
Mm,
the solutions themselves are all mostly the same. So you could have people working on the solutions in lockstep without compromising any of their particular beliefs on what they think is going to happen.
mm,
And we are encouraged not to do that. We're encouraged to fight each other online about which particular issue
mm.
is a problem. Right. So this is the analysis I did, gosh, 20 years ago. So I never wrote it down too. I wonder if that would be useful. Um, all right. So if a thorium system works, the value chain from cradle to grave is much smaller.
Mm,
So at the moment, for example, let's take nuclear. You've got to mine the uranium, which only happens in several places in the world. You've the uranium that comes out of the ground is mostly uranium U328. Like most of it's an isotope that's not useful.
mm,
The isotope that is useful is uranium 235, which is 0.7% of the mass of uranium in natural uranium. So then you've got to what's called enrich it,
mm,
where using centrifuges to increase uranium 235 to about 4%. So about 4 or 5%. That's the fuel. So your fuel rod is this big, but only 4 or 5% of it's actually useful. So then you've got to manufacture the fuel rod. That only happens in some places of the world. Put it in the reactor, does its thing, and you need specialist equipment and people and all that. The fuel rod comes out. You've then got to then store it somewhere because
mm.
96% of it is still there and it's all very radioactive. Only happens in some places in the world. The current systems are dependent on a six-continent just-in-time supply grid that's very complex, and it's based on the assumption that magic happens and it will always happen.
Yeah, and it's got a constant supply of cheap petroleum and electricity to keep everything working.
Right.
Mm,
So the thorium systems, let's say it works, will break down into a region like the city of Brisbane
mm,
could run its own thorium system. The town of Gympie could have its own thorium system.
mm,
But so you could have something, say, the size of Queensland that could actually source its own thorium from local resources and turn it into a fuel salt. It's
mm.
not complicated.
Yeah,
So the simple answer to that, you have a smaller value chain that's less complex, that requires less specialist training to do it, which means you could get back on your feet faster.
yeah, yeah. And not relying on continent scale electrical grids
No,
probably makes them a lot more resilient to
yeah,
electromagnetic influences, like a
yeah.
solar storm.
I was talking to the German government, and I was talking to the German government, and I tried to give them the purple transition, which they don't like change. They don't like ideas that didn't originate in the German language. They don't like technology that was invented after 1850. All these issues, right? But I told them, if you do this and it works, you don't need to talk to the Russians or the Americans ever again, and
Hmm.
you would control your own energy sector from inside Germany.
Hmm.
And he looked at me like a stunned mullet.
Are we allowed to do that? Let me just
Yes,
call
that's it. That
someone.
that
Yeah,
that was actually the thing. Are we allowed to think like that? That was
yeah,
actually the reaction.
yeah.
Oh, we'll look at it. Look at it. Yes, yes, we'll look at it. Haven't heard from them.
Now, this is a question I am really fascinated about. So, in one camp, you have various scientists doing projections for carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, going up and up and up all the way to 2100 to
Mhm.
like kind of many very worrying scenarios. If that trend, just draw a straight line on the graph, there you go, you've done your job for the next year. That's an oversimplification. I'm sorry, that was unkind. But on the other hand, you have a smaller, less well-connected group of people saying, "Oh, there's actually not that much useful oil and coal," and I think particularly we need the oil to get the coal out of the ground. If there was no oil
Mm,
left, and it looks like it's going to run out before the coal, the remaining coal reserves might be stranded assets. And I think I've seen one NASA report that tried to put peak oil and peak coal together with
mm,
projections for atmospheric carbon dioxide and whatever effects that have. and they couldn't get much beyond 450 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere, which is pretty much where we're at now. And I just wonder, being such a data-driven, like hard-nosed person, have you looked into any of those intersections that almost nobody seems to be studying?
So I haven't looked at the carbon pollution stuff. My focus has been ecological, which
Mm,
is the species die-off issue, and the solutions associated with that have nothing to do with carbon, as it turns out.
hmm
I haven't looked at the. I have looked at well, oil, gas, coal. It's going to be around for a while. Coal, in particular, will be around for a long time.
hmm
Oil is in trouble now. Gas will be in trouble in about 10 years' time,
hmm
right? And coal will never be in trouble. I think what will happen is it will be replaced as something more sensible. For
hmm
example, iron powder. It's
Yeah,
just easier.
yeah.
Um, but all the sources for carbon production, uh, two of the primary ones are in a few years' time will be forced by virtue of supply and demand is gonna has to make it so to think of something else.
Mm. Okay,
We just
okay,
have to think so.
all
And
right.
so the simple answer is
Yeah,
I actually believe the NASA report is correct, but the whole thing with carbon dioxide is a comparative storm in the teacup with a real problem that's actually on the other side of that people will happily acknowledge but refuse to do anything about.
yeah. The resource crunch is happening now. Global
Yeah.
warming, if it becomes severe, is the next thing coming down the line. And I even personally think the direct ecological effects of higher CO2 on things like photosynthesis are going to be much more significant than changes in average temperature. And we're already
Yeah.
at a
So,
high
so
enough level for that to be making changes. And we know so little about ecology that we're still kind of spinning around trying to figure out what's happening now.
yeah, so all bankers should be fired and they should retrain as ecologists. Job done. So right. Tongue in cheek. Easy,
Mm.
guys. Easy. Calm down. Calm down. So what 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 I think.
Oh yeah, no, sorry, you go.
So the whole. I'm a geologist.
Mm,
All right. I'm a physicist first, geologist second. But I study the natural world, and in geology, the climate is always changing. So that the current climate change movement is focused on carbon dioxide is going up. We're about to turn into the planet Venus. That's actually not what I think is going to happen. I think instead we're going to go through a series of non-linear changes. You don't get a straight line anywhere in nature, not for very long.
mm,
Things don't go in a particular. So you get to it goes up and up and up and up, and then something happens, and you have a. I believe we're going to have a planet-wide bioshift, and a
mhm,
new kind of environment will take its place.
mm.
Right. So instead of saying we're all doomed, place your head between your legs and kiss your ass goodbye, and um, that seems to be the mentality I keep coming across. The environment is about to change into something else.
Mhm.
And as it does, everything in that environment will adapt and change with it.
Yeah.
Our job is to adapt what we are in that new environment. And I do not hear anyone making that discussion.
Yeah. I like to point out too that 11,000 odd years ago, we had an equally dramatic, sudden change in the climate. There was that really dramatic
Hmm.
warming. There was lots of water, sea levels rising over the next century or two. It was a huge
Yep.
change, and we got through that. So I think we've got issues,
There's
we've
a
got challenges,
there's a
but we are adaptable.
There's a geologist called Randall Carson who
hmm
makes the case that that's actually was a comet impact on an ice glacier. So we
hmm
don't have a crater left because it hit the ice,
mm
but we have other geological signatures to show that that's actually what happened. So the planet got hit by a comet. Um, so the human species got knocked on its ass, but as it got up, it invented agriculture
hmm
in its current form.
Yeah.
Right. So I see instead of seeing like 8 billion individuals, I see the human species as one social network.
Mm.
And that social network is going to go through a series of evolutions. And some things are going to work out for some people, but others not. But there'll be an exchange of information between them. And humans, for all their faults, for all their determined, learned ignorances, their refusal to meet reality, their pettiness, their cruelty, all the crap we keep coming up with,
Mm.
we're also amazingly adaptable once our face is in the fight.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So 8 billion people, will all 8 billion people continue happily? Probably not.
Yeah.
But there's a subpopulation within there that go, oh, yeah, we should do something about this, shouldn't we?
Mm.
And then human innovation kicks in. This one I'm saying is the future is here, but it's non-linear.
Hmm.
Some areas of the planet are going to be do quite poorly, but some areas, little pockets, will be okay. So what I would like is to be in one of those pockets, either having the good ideas or standing next to someone having the good ideas that will actually be part of the slip knot that makes it into the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and another question I want to ask you: if, as a round figure, say we've got thorium reserves for 1,000 years, and we have this like prolonged golden age, would we be setting up our distant descendants for a more severe energy challenge when thorium reaches its limits? Or do you
So
have
two
any thoughts
things.
of, and related to that, do you have any thoughts about the possibility of currently exotic energy or physics emerging at some point in the future?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Mm,
Glad we sorted that out.
mm.
Okay. Uh, right. So one of my mates in New Zealand, Mike Joy, and he says, look, energy is one thing, but and while it's all very difficult, it's forcing humanity to face certain things about itself. Like a lot of our beliefs are fundamentally flawed. And if we had an energy system that just kept going, we'd never face the reality of those flaws.
Hmm.
So while this current situation is very difficult, it is perhaps the only situation for us to grow up and become genuinely sustainable and learn what we need to learn. Right. So um, is this crunch a bad thing? And ultimately, no. Because we've got to decide that we're actually part of this planetary environment, not separate to it, and the planetary environment is something for us to exploit and make money out of.
Mm.
Right. So what happens when thorium runs out? So, it's a finite resource like anything else. Depending on how you do the calculation, I've got 6,000 years in one calculation for the amount of thorium. But then if you use spent nuclear fuel and uranium in the same systems, that can be blown out to 11,000 years.
Oh, I like that. That's a
So,
familiarly historic number.
so okay, let's say all that works out. There's a few serious things to overcome in all that. The next generation of energy is already here. This is now when I did my tour of duty through energy systems in 2021, the 1,000-page report, I came across a whole series of energy systems that run orthodox. And because they're unorthodox, management asked me to take them out. I said, look, come on, this is a bridge too far.
Hmm.
And the bridge too far, the phrase was, all right, you've gone too far this time. Take that entire section out, take a cold shower, and we'll never speak of this again. Right. So what this was the White House, the American White House had released a statement saying what we call UFOs. They call them UAPs,
Hmm.
unidentified aerial phenomenon, were real,
Hmm.
right? And so they had a picture. So I had a picture in the report, and this, we're a geological survey. Don't make me hurt you. Don't make me come over there.
And
So
it's interesting how that topic has become radioactive in our culture. Like I can feel half of the audience's eyes rolling at the
yep,
mention of just that acronym. It has all of this
right.
baggage that comes with it.
And that baggage, I believe, is a social programming. So I did a degree in physics, and one of my lecturers worked on the US Star Wars program in the 80s,
Hmm.
shooting down rockets with lasers. And so anyone who's any good in physics is quietly recruited and disappears into the military industrial complex and is never seen again.
Hmm.
And so the physics that we are actually looking at is the sanitized version of what's actually possible. And so there's a great deal of social engineering and social programming to step away from certain ideas. And a lot of it's when you actually get down to it, is it's not that rational. Anyway, so I went down the rabbit hole on some of this stuff, and there has been technological developments by scientists back as far back as 1920 that were looking at a whole series of stuff. Like Nikola Tesla, what was he doing?
Hmm.
And if what he was doing worked, how would we use it?
Yep.
And if we did use it, should we? And the answer is no.
Mm.
Right. So Tesla had the ability to he invented AC electronics, AC wave theory. A lot of the technologies in a modern world he invented, but he's been written out of history, which is
Hmm.
interesting.
And he's
So
become kind of a lightning rod for that kind of culturally
yep.
framed crack pottery. And it's like, no,
So
he's a real person who did real physics.
right, and a lot of the technology we use today, he invented.
Mm.
Um, he thought he had a fundamentally different view of the world, though. Like instead of the classic quantum mechanics view of a lattice of atoms, he said everything's frequency and vibration.
Hmm.
And so right, so he had the ability to transmit electricity long distances. So he had a big hydroelectric generation plant in Niagara Falls, and he was able to transmit electricity from I think it was Long Island in the US out to Wycliffe in the UK and back again with 98% efficiency
Hmm.
electricity. So what that meant was you didn't need a battery and you didn't need a power plant and everything. You could be anywhere in the world with an aerial. You could be driving along on your ship, and you got the aerial up. Like we download Wi-Fi and data off Wi-Fi, you could download electricity,
Hmm.
and then you could run your ship like that. Okay, that would have revolutionized things. But then we are now starting to understand the health problems with, say, electronic smog,
Hmm.
the 5G debate and everything. Should we have industrial grade electricity in the air? The answer is probably not.
Do we want to turn the whole planet into the inside of a microwave oven?
Yeah, probably not. Anyway, there's about I don't know 30 or 40 different ideas that you looked at, and they were all there. Like a zero
Mm.
point energy was another one. But what the White House briefing did, they had a picture of one of these things, and they said, "Look, this is real. We don't understand what they are." Now, I don't care if the pilot or whatever that is a little green man with antenna or a Russian agent. I don't give a shit.
Hmm.
I have two questions. One, what is the technology that is driving this craft? And two, what's its power source?
Hmm.
Right. And and they go, right. And so the only thing that all our conventional technology descriptions fail in the description of that. And the only thing that actually comes even close is electrogravitics,
Hmm.
which was first postulated in 1920, and they were since debunked as a crackpot theory. But that from what I've personally seen, t talking to people back at university, 30 years ago, is anything that's useful to the military disappears,
Hmm.
and then there is a campaign to smear them in public to make sure no one else does the same thing.
Do
Okay, right.
let's put our like elite conspiracy theory hat on for a moment because this kind of stuff is
Yes.
fun. I don't want to
Yeah.
turn into Joe Rogan, but I mean the way the first industrial revolution unfolded was uncontrolled, chaotic. It led
Yep.
to lots of different power centers, like suddenly having these abilities that they didn't have before and rampaging around the planet in a huge mess. Devil's advocate here, like, could it actually be a better course of events that if these other alternative physics are so potentially powerful that they're not just thrown out for anybody to run with?
So what's happened is as we've gone along, like 2 centuries ago, companies were small. But as gone along, we've had corporations appear and they've gotten larger and larger and larger. And
Mm.
now we've got corporations larger than whole nation states.
Hmm.
And the function mentality behind those corporations was we will look after our own interests and we will kill off anything that might threaten our business model.
Hmm.
And as we've gone along, that's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. So when we get to at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, a couple of guys in their shed and a bench could put something together to make an electric motor. Ha! We've got an electric motor,
Mm.
and they could make a battery out of your lead acid. Oh, we got a battery. Okay, and they could go into business. And it's the equivalent of say 4 or 5 guys. But now to actually bring technology to the market requires billions of investment. Like what does Toyota spend to actually design a new product and bring it to the market?
Mm.
And what's their opinion on competition? Right.
Mm.
What I believe has happened is um, we're a very emotional based species where our emotional belief in ideology will dictate what is available,
Mhm.
what information we're prepared to look at, what data we're prepared to accept. And so that emotion belief happens first, then we'll look at the data. And that's actually that fundamental problem you see in every frontier at the moment.
Mhm.
And so at some level, we've been convinced certain things are not a good idea and certain things are a good idea.
Mhm.
And while we've got everything works fine at the moment, why will we look at crackpot stuff?
Mm.
And yes, if someone was to invent it and it could take off, it could make all sorts of things obsolete. But at the embryonic stage, these ideas, every time they appear, they just seem to magically stop. Like Stan Mayer put up the idea of the water cell vehicle, where you take water and you split hydrogen from it and that fuels the car. They go, oh yeah, cool. And everything, no, that's a crackpot. No, that's not. Sorry, that's not sensible.
Mm.
Toyota has since come out with a car that runs on water
Mhm.
as a concept.
Mm.
And okay, so hang on a sec. Didn't we burn Stan Mayer at the stake for this?
Yeah.
Uh,
Maybe that like multinational car company has to go back and read an 11th grade chemistry textbook on thermodynamics.
well, no, no,
Or not. Maybe they do know what they're doing.
no, they've actually posted a concept car, a concept engine that they say works. They've
Mm.
also posted an ammonia fueled engine.
Hmm.
They've gone down the hydrogen route,
Mm.
hydrogen cars. They've backed away from electric vehicles. So yeah, and what I'm saying here is just because someone says something stupid, but they do so from an emotional point of view, doesn't make it stupid,
Mm. Mm.
right? We've got to have a frank discussion about the facts and reality.
There's one interesting question I want to ask. I want to turn the lens on
Yeah.
you. Speaking
Mm.
of like emotion, like how did you become a kind of person who can look these issues like dead in the eye, whereas most people's instinct is to kind of like just look away and like, put the TV back
I
on.
suppose um, there's a couple of things here. From the very beginning, I don't know, it's just happenstance. I always felt I was outside the pack, outside the system, trying to get in.
Mm.
So I did a degree in physics and geology, and I was trying to get a job as an engineer. To me, and to be an engineer was the shit. It was the best you could possibly be was to be an engineer. Well, let's do it. I talked my way into a research group that did mining research called the Julius Kruchnik Mineral Research Center. This is like, 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. And for years, I was working away as a technician and I was convinced, absolutely convinced I was missing something. Everyone around me had a degree in engineering. And I only had a degree in physics, which meant I had to work 10 times harder just to keep up with these guys. What I didn't realize until much later was in those engineering degrees, the, I understand what a degree of engineering is versus science. Once you actually pick up the creed of engineering, like the approach, the mentality, how you approach things, which I did by working there and later doing a PhD in engineering, then, but the science foundation, while it was a very different form, but I didn't have the same trappings as everyone else. Everyone else had a formula
Mm.
that they just worked towards. I didn't even know the formula existed. And so what happened was I passed everyone by in really abstract, weird stuff. And I didn't realize it until later. And then I went from thinking with a bit of what you might call imposter syndrome in the beginning, where, man, um, yeah, I'm not quite qualified to be here. I have to work 10 times harder before someone notices
Mm-hmm.
and I'm shown the door. And so there was this inherent insecurity that of not being good enough. But then one day I woke up and I realized I'd passed everyone else. My methods were different and quite abstract. And suddenly I was the biggest, baddest cat in the land and no one could keep up with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what the hell happened? Right. I also, for many years, I was trying to actually get my, this might sound a little odd, but I used dreaming as a problem solving platform, where I was trying to get my subconscious to talk to my conscious, where as you go to sleep, you would think and work on a problem. And you just before you go to bed and before you actually, and when you wake up, before you even get up and go to the bathroom, um, try and remember any dreams you had, and then write down in a forced where you're training yourself to do this.
Mm.
And over time, some really, really weird ideas came out, which I tried, and then I then took into the physical world, and then developed a series of experiments around, and then later, the people around me go, "Yeah, you're one crazy dude," but yeah. Um, all right, so that was the foundation. Then there was the um, realization when I first came across the oil problem, and I would go and talk to people about it, and you would find the pushback that we all did, and it really did strike me how it wasn't a discussion of the facts; it was an emotional discussion of belief, and
Mm-hmm.
people would get very angry about having their beliefs being challenged. And I thought, oi, okay, all right. And so then there was the battleground associated with that. Then there was the period of time where what happens if you see something, like in a professional context, and you don't speak up, but then something happens will take the whole company down.
Mm-hmm.
Whole companies could go down, whole groups could go down because, and this is the engineering viewpoint. Engineers work in teams. Scientists tend to be, workers, in ones and twos or on their own.
Mm.
The engineer realizes that if we don't work together and if something blows up in our face, the whole team goes down,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if someone sees something and it's a problem, they've got to bring it up to the rest of their team members
Mm.
because if it's real, the whole team goes down.
Mm.
So it's not about you, it's about the rest of the group around you.
Yeah.
And then I saw a series of things especially when like, people doing really good work and everything, but there wasn't the money and whole companies were crashing. And I actually saw the mining crash about 8 months before it happened. And I tried to tell my management at the time. But I attended banking seminars and I saw what the banks were saying and doing. I said, yeah, this is going to hurt. And I tried to tell management and they said, no, we don't want to know. Don't tell us. Like, we're here for the money.
Mm-hmm.
So then we actually I got to Europe and I heard all these promises being made that were just bullshit. And what's the consequences of this going wrong? And so what I had the feeling of all the work I'd done thus far was largely irrelevant. No one really used it. I got paid very well for it. And people liked it, but did it actually do anything? Did it mean anything? No.
Mm.
And so if my understanding was correct that everything was about to crash and crash hard, then just marking time like everyone else, well, the firing squad's coming eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so then you try and sort of navigate a path through that, and that involves, well, pointing this out, speaking up. But the decision to do so is risky. Every
Mm.
report was dangerous. It could be the end of my career,
It's an emperor's
right?
new clothes dynamic.
Yes, very much so. Very
Mm.
much so. So it's a risk, so you have to have a strategy and you have to understand that this will come at a cost. But if it works, the work you do is actually valuable
Mm.
and has more longevity.
I have an observation. Like the title of this podcast, Recombination Nation, is about the power of hybridization, and I do. That's obviously a
Yeah.
biological thing, but it happens
Mm.
in culture as well too. And your
And
background,
industry.
which bridges scientific mindset and engineering mindset,
Mm.
I think is a really potent example of the power of bringing traditions together and letting them kind of
Mm.
tussle it out, either in an individual like yourself or in teams. But I don't think it happens enough in our society
No,
today. And you get
it
really
doesn't.
interesting results when you do it.
We're encouraged to actually sort of stick to a formula and stick with it.
Hmm.
The period of when I worked as an organic, a labor on an organic farm was also quite eye-opening.
Mm.
Uh, I've crossed fields about, I don't know, 5 or 6 times now from different technical eras where a conventional career tends to have like one, maybe two eras.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so
Interesting.
it's like you've got this nomad sort of existence going from one place to the other, and you go, well, now what?
Is that psychological principle that power is something you hope to tap into with the purple transition and the project in Chile or Peru that you've been talking about?
So
Because you've got to
yes,
bring people together and groups of humans in one place can be very non-linear.
well, funny you should mention that. So yes, so the it's basically systems thinking applied to our industrial world, but systems thinking applied to our world. Like,
Mm,
what do we need to do to live? Like, who are we? Like, I became very interested in there's a long range project like the whole transhumanism debate about should we merge with machines? And they said it would be more efficient, but should we do it?
hmm.
And the answer is no, but we need to understand machines. But there's an ethical thing like who are we? What are we? If we go down this particular path, where do we get to?
Mm,
Right. So the being when I presented my stuff a couple of hundred times to various people, there were three reactions that happened all the time. One was shock. They were completely unprepared. Two was they were not able to refute what I was doing, even if they had the time to do so. And the third reaction was they asked me what they should do. Now, imagine you're in Australian Parliament, it's talking to ministers and their aides, and with all their resources and money and everything, they're asking me, just a guy with a cheap computer and internet connection, what they should do.
hmm.
And at first it was demoralizing, and then evolution always happens when you're uncomfortable. And so I came to the realization that I was in a unique position, and I just said, bugger it, I'll have a go. And so thinking in terms of what's the foundation meaning of what I've come together, like what do we do about it? We've got about 7 or 8 macro scale challenges in what we call the poly crisis. If we were to treat these as a problem to solve, what would that look like?
Hmm.
And what I found was a lot of it was quite manageable if we got off our asses and did something but thought differently.
Hmm.
We are both the bottleneck um, barrier and the solution coming down to perception of our society and how we see things.
Hmm.
So I've developed what I call the purple transition. The green transition won't work, but the purple one might. Why purple? It's my wife's favorite color. Ah, ah, ah.
It was also the color of the first photosynthetic organisms on the planet.
like it. There you
Yep.
go.
Yep.
There you go. And it was also one of the last colors left that they hadn't been used up by the hydrogen guys.
Hmm.
Um, anyway, so I came up with an idea. Like we need to fundamentally have a new energy system, but also the technology needs to change as well. So a new transport system. So you need to have like cross discipline, and everything needs to be reinvented, like broken down to its basic elements and reassembled
Yeah.
from the point of view of a new set of boundary conditions.
Yeah,
And
because
that
if
things
you
of
only
that.
solve like one of these big issues, it's just putting a band-aid on the failing
Yep.
system. It it,
Yeah.
it it reminds me of you get agricultural packages during like the dawn of civilization. If you just domesticate wheat, it's not
Yep.
actually that useful. But if you have wheat and peas and apples and cows
Mm.
and silkworms, then you suddenly have a set of things that all harmonize
Yep.
with each other in a interesting way.
Yeah, you see that in computer game Civilization,
Hmm.
where they have the technology development tree, that actually sort of comes out to you. Yeah, this with this, and that means that, and in a system context, it all happens. Right. So the project in South America that I'm trying to put together, um, it has two parts. One's Promethean Nexus, the other is Vulcan Catalyst. What I'm trying to do there is if the purple transition was actually done, what would it look like? As in
Hmm.
if we actually did it. And so with the understanding of we have to simplify things and shrink the human systems and um, also from the prepper mentality too, where the original idea was a small city or a small town, sorry, 10,000 people. It's about, where I want to work, where I want to work. What would that look like? And so I liked the mentality of the Venus project, which had the idea of, well, if we were to do this, but the metric of is no longer economic success. Once we get past survival, what are we really going for? Quality of life of the people who live there.
Hmm.
Oh, and so what's come out of this, and this is actually work that's yet to come, but I'm looking at, for example, what money is, and can we actually change it into something else? And can we use it for different things? And I'm actually going down the rabbit hole on all the different social systems, like, Adam Smith's, Wealth of Nations, and then, Karl Marx's Das Kapital. And everything. What's the foundations behind that, and why are they both flawed, and what actually has to happen in the future? And I've got the capacity to write a third alternative.
Hmm.
And what I call the resource balanced economy is a biophysical system of economics that's based on resources and energy and biophysical limits.
I just
And
had a really crazy idea to throw your way. So
Mhm.
historically, we've had a gold or silver based monetary system.
Mhm.
Could you have a thorium based currency?
So
It's a
yes,
little
is the
bit
simple
toxic, but I mean, it could be
any
it could be
anything can
packaged.
anything can be tokenized.
Mm,
The system that's coming, I believe, that will replace it is you've got a basket of resources,
mm-hmm,
and it's not gold is not useful because not
mm-hmm,
a nation. Most nations don't have enough gold to go to a gold-backed currency now that the
mm-hmm,
system's many times larger than it was. And gold's not what we need anyway. What we need is resources, and
mm-hmm,
every nation state has resources, which means we can trade. And what I was suggested is a basket of resources that we could trade. Like food could be a resource.
mm-hmm,
It can be tokenized. It comes down to a series of barter-based agreements, but in a currency context. But things like copper,
mm-hmm,
ingots of copper of a certain purity, ingots of tin, ingots of steel, like magnesium. Someone's made them. Okay, now we're going to trade, and in exchange for that trade, we get these things.
mm-hmm,
And thorium could be in there. But you've got a resource that can be traded or it can be consumed. And so this is the architecture behind a lot of the cryptos, where you have like a stock market share, and its value is, you pay for it, and it goes up. But a cryptocurrency, its value is not only what you pay for it, but what it does.
mm-hmm.
And there's a change in paradigm. And so that environment, instead of actually making money out of cryptos, we use it as a tokenized system to manage resources.
Mm.
And
I mean,
instead of,
that's
yeah,
ultimately what a financial system is. It's a distributed mechanism for decision making.
who does what, who owns what.
Mm-hmm,
And gold, I think, became sensible because it was relatively rare, but you couldn't eat it,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
which
mm,
meant once you've got gold, there always will be gold in someone's hands.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so,
Mm.
yeah, that's kind of the transition we're looking at.
I really admire your work. Even though I'm in a different camp, I think it's probably too late and we're heading for a low-tech future. But I really admire that there are people like you doing this depth of work. And we've been talking for a while. We should probably wrap this up. I have one final question, which I think is ending things on a hopeful note, happy ending to the story.
Yeah.
What do you think humanity might achieve if we lay a foundation today for 1,000 years of abundant thorium energy?
So humanity is at a crossroads, and there's a lot of things within us socially which we have failed to come across until now. We've got education's at an all-time high, but we've got to decide whether we're socially mature enough to call ourselves civilization. What the opportunity, I think, is if humanity was to learn what it needed to learn, which, as you said, is too late. Um, Also, you might notice most people you come across are not interested in these topics.
Mm-hmm.
And when this stuff actually happens, instead of being told about it on the internet, you see it when you walk down the street, right? Then it's going to be a very different world,
Mm.
right? So for the vast majority of humanity, they're going to do it the hard way. But there's going to be pockets of humanity that are going to have some kind of solution which is useful in some form. And then there's many different stripes of it, and they're going to be all over the world. So we're going to go through a period of trials and tribulations, and let's call it one of life's little lessons. We come out the other side, and humanity has become wise, as in we've understood what we need to understood by virtue of things going wrong and having our fingers smacked.
Mm-hmm.
Don't touch the stove. The stove is hot. We put
Yeah.
our lower lip on the stove. Oh, it's hot. Look at that. Um, then an energy system comes in. Let's say the thorium system works. And that energy system has a longevity measured in thousands of years. If we can maintain the wisdom that we learn over the next couple of decades, and then we're given like another era of development, the opportunity is to face some of our frailties and grow up past them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we're talking pain here, and pain is a great teacher. And then we're talking memory.
Mm-hmm.
Do we remember what we learned, or do we go back to just, oh, it's fine? Or is the new world demonstrated in no uncertain terms that we have to think in terms of biophysical limits? Thou shalt not, or thou shalt die. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's a,
Mm-hmm.
is that the kind of world? So um, we're like, I model the human society at the moment as the whole species can be modeled as a single person that's an obese teenager addicted to crack that's been told to kick the habit and lose some weight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? What would happen if that teenager did all that and became a functional adult?
Mm-hmm.
That's the opportunity in front of us.
Yeah. 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 And on that amazing note, I will say thank you, Simon. Where would you like people to go to read more about your work? I'll put all the links in the
Okay.
show notes.
So there's three websites. SimonMichaux.com, that's actually all my professional work, YouTubes and papers and everything all in one place. Then there's future work, which is the Promethean Nexus project, as in what if we this is a small project which I sort of see like I'm going to build a innovation hub in South America that will have a mandate to look at unorthodox things and actually manufacture things using if we were to actually sort of build some of these things. I call it Promethean Nexus. So that's promethean.nexus.com. That'll be in the show notes. The third one's Vulcan Catalyst. Now, this is actually a corporate revenue raising. If you actually raise the flag, and this is the problem of getting different groups together to try and talk to each other, anyone who's prepared to fund an industrial asset like a thorium reactor, a pyrolysis plant, um, production of diesel, they're happy to do that. They're not going to want to fund, let's build a new society.
Mm-hmm.
So the Vulcan Catalyst is a thing to actually raise revenue and make money to supply cheap electricity and cheap diesel fuel without tapping into fossil fuels in any way in a small value chain. And so that's the third website. So the idea is Vulcan Catalyst secures the land, funds the construction of the industrial assets, builds the starting seed of the city, as in the staff who work there, and will eventually fund the research hub, which I call the Chrysopoeia Institute.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Promethean Nexus is to develop the long-range plan with the more abstract ideas that will happen on the same site.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I highly recommend people who haven't seen your work before to start sprinting and catch up with all the amazing work that you've done. Because yeah, you've been very active getting these ideas out there. You've put your neck out, and
Mm.
you've made it this far, and I'm very grateful for that and all of the work that you've done. So, Simon, thank you very
Thank
much.
you. You're welcome, mate.